I'm sure you've all read her profile and seen some of the really interesting things she's done, including very impressively being a Dragon's Den winner. So not the easiest thing to secure funding from those guys. But Dupsy's going to be talking to us today about her business, Intern Avenue. She's the founder and chief executive. And it's very much on the current list of hot topics, isn't it? You see things like the apprentices levy and a big focus on getting younger people into employment. So very interested to hear all about it. So without any further ado, I shall hand over to Dupsy.
Hi, thank you all for coming, and it's really great to be able to have this opportunity to speak to you all. What I'm going to be talking about today is the kind of prickly topic of unpaid internships, what the law is currently saying, and you know, how it might apply to many of you. Just so I have an understanding of everybody, does anybody here has anyone here hired an intern or okay, so we've got a couple of people who have done that, and a quick show of hands of people who have graduates currently working within their organisations. So that's also a decent number, so that's good. I'll be going through this, but it's not a formal presentation where I'll be talking at you the entire time. If you have questions, raise your hand or just shout out, and I'm going to leave some time for questions as well. There's some people coming in. Come in. Welcome. So, my name's Dupsy. I'm the founder and CEO of Intern Avenue, but my background is that I was a barrister until I decided to quit my job in a blaze of glory and decided to set up Intern Avenue. It's a project that I'm very passionate about. And what it does is we have an online platform that's kind of like an eHarmony for the entry-level market. Students and graduates create detailed profiles, and we use algorithms to connect them online. So one of the features, we've got lots of high-tech stuff and we've won many awards, but one of the things about our business is we only allowed paid opportunities, and the reason for that will become apparent as we go through. So I started the business, it launched live in October 2012. I was on Dragon's Den back then and managed to survive unscathed, and since then we've been really pleased by the response that we've had to the way that we're approaching this market. We've helped many hundreds of companies find exceptional students and graduates to join their businesses. We partner with the NUS. Recently I had the pleasure of meeting Angela Merkel, who endorsed the platform, and we're partnering with Vodafone to help us expand. So I think this is a massive opportunity for businesses to help young people, but also to help themselves harness some really amazing talent, which is often untapped. So the content of this talk is going to be a little bit about what an internship is, and I think there's been a lot of confusing, especially since there's been a lot of talk about apprentices and stuff like that. So I'll talk a little bit about what an internship is and how it is distinct from maybe a traditional graduate placement or potentially apprenticeship. Then what the relevant law is, and some business cases to go through it, and a little bit on what we're seeing as best practice, and there'll be plenty of time for questions, so do shoot. So one of the most, I think, frustrating things about internships is it's not actually a standard legal definition. So it's not something that exists anywhere, which is part of the reason why it causes quite a lot of confusion. Really what it is it's some kind of short-term or fixed, I put paid in brackets because I'm going to talk a little bit about the law, but it's a work experience placement, or it's really a placement to facilitate the transition from formal education into professional work. So often what we see as a business is that companies want to hire graduates or people out of university, but they're not entirely sure whether they have the skill sets or the culture fit for their companies. So they're offering something like a 3 to 6 month fixed term contract effectively for them to come in, learn a little bit about their business, see how they get on, and if they're a good fit, they're offered a permanent position. Or sometimes businesses just have some cyclical workflows. If they know that, towards the end of a tax year or over summer they're overrun, sometimes it's good to have someone in the business. They get some work experience and some are hopefully providing value to the company. The company get to see whether they're a good fit and hopefully hire them off the back of that. So it's a way for you to try before you hire, rather than offering a more traditional graduate contract with a 6-month probationary period and having to have the nasty conversation if someone doesn't work out, to be like, oh, sorry mate, you're out. So it's a I think one of the reasons why employers like it so much is the presumption is that if we work well, it'll go forward, rather than if it doesn't work well, you're going to be leaving. So it's a nice way for them to get that kind of introduction into the business. And 80% of leading employers are offering paid internships. I mean, it's a big thing right now. And it's a huge thing for young people, because in many industries, businesses simply won't offer jobs to people who don't have some form of work experience. And the average is that 40% of entry-level positions are being filled by these kind of programs, intern and placements. In some industries like finance, that's looking closer to 75 or 80% of their entry-level jobs. So it's a big area for fast-growing companies and large companies to fill their talent needs. So what's the law here? Now, everyone hopefully in this room has heard of national minimum wage legislation. It's really thick and kind of boring, but mainly what it means is that most adult workers in this country must be paid national minimum wage. Now, there is sometimes people who try and create some grey area as to whether interns are actually workers, but pretty much anyone who's over the age of 16 is a worker in the eyes of the government. So it will apply in almost all instances. And so one thing that we often get asked is, what happens if it's just a 4-week placement? Hopefully that should be okay. What happens if the person understands that they're not going to be paid? Is that okay? One's if they're a volunteer. Is that okay? Now, there has been case law around this, and there was a quite notable case where a graduate worked in a business for 5 weeks. It was agreed, there was even a letter saying that it wouldn't be paid, and she was able to take her employer to court and reclaim the unpaid wages. So the government, the courts, when they're thinking about this, will actually look at whether the person is providing work of value, and we'll look into what the reality is of the arrangement, rather than anything that's being put in. Really, more and more people, the courts are enforcing national minimum wage, even for interns, even if they've been working for several months. A very large technology company had an unpaid intern working for 6 months, and they managed to backclaim all of their wages because national minimum wage applies. So I always say, when you're thinking about this type of talent pool, it's the same as anything else. They're workers like anyone else, and that should be the starting point. As at October 2015, national minimum wage is reviewed every October. It's $6.70 an hour, which works out as about £1,000 a month, or about $13,000 a year.
Do those guys get the national minimum wage applied for the period, or did they get the average salary or whatever it was?
Well, they actually, I think, certainly in the case of the reported case of the 5-week unpaid, I think they were applied national minimum wage for that period. They also got their costs and a couple of other bits and pieces on top of that. But it was national minimum wage. I think it was noted whilst in court that the person, it was a media company, and the role that this person, the unpaid worker, was doing was similar to that of a junior editor, which, you know, typically would cost a business somewhere between, you know, 28 to 35k. So the point was made that, you know, average graduate salary is about 22,000. We're looking at, you know, considerably less than that for national minimum wage. So it's a wonderful opportunity to provide something. Lots of companies actually push for London living wage because we're all in London and it's expensive. But young people are actually very mobile. Often they're still in student accommodation or staying with parents, but offering them at least national minimum wage tends to be the minimum standard. In the case of Sony, I also think it was national minimum wage that was applied, but I didn't. I could double check and get back to you on that. Another thing that people often get confused is apprentices versus interns. Now, the apprentice scheme is a big thing that the government is pushing at the moment, but really it's designed to cover people who are leaving, often school-age people who decide not to go to university and want to go straight into work. They spend some time training, and the government has very generous provisions available for training institutions and employers to hire. But typically it's for roles that require on-the-job training. So plumbing would be an excellent example where there is no I know that there are trade schools, but you wouldn't usually learn to plumb at university or something like that. So it's a very different route. It's a very different type of worker who's coming in. It's usually someone who's very young, 16 or above, and there are some rules in terms of supervision and such for employers relating to it. Recently we've seen a rash of apprenticeships being applied to things which traditionally graduates might do, and there is very live debate as to whether those work in practice, and we can certainly talk about that if that's something that people are interested in. So, one of the key facts, a YouGov report surveyed a large number of line managers and found that 88% of them were unaware of even the possibility of unpaid internship. So you see them actively being advertised, and often these businesses have no idea that there's even some debate around whether an unpaid internship is legal or not. I would say in the vast majority of cases it is not, and the sanctions are actually pretty serious. So from anyone who has had the misfortune of going through an employment tribunal will know that it's a nasty business and it can be very expensive. There's also HMRC who can investigate, but because of course if you have a massive team of unpaid workers, it's a tax, you're evading tax. So unpaid employers, national insurance and PAYE can also be an issue. You have the possibility of a kind of blank check for as long as they're working. So until the statutes of limitations go from each person leaving your company, there is the potential that a person might leave your company and then get some advice and make a claim, which is never something that's nice to be hanging over you. And then in the legislation itself, there is the possibility of criminal proceedings being taken against the directors of the business. And there is a name and shame kind of list that the government puts out of serial offenders of directors who don't pay or low pay their workers. At the moment, the fine is 5k and it's a criminal record, but there is talk going through government of that increasing to 20k. And then every other month, I think you might have read about a fashion designer or someone or a company who has elicited some bad publicity. Most recently, the UN had a unpaid intern who was living in a tent, because, literally, because he couldn't afford to work for an extended period unpaid. So it's really not. it's really not the way that you kind of would like to go. There are, of course, some exceptions to national minimum wage. So there is a distinction between work shadowing and a work placement. So work shadowing is that kind of often school-age person who kind of follows you around for a week and takes a note but isn't actively contributing to your business. Those sorts of things are fine. Volunteer work in NGOs and charities is an exception, but it has to be as a volunteer. There has been definitely some precedent to say that an admin worker who's providing office work, for example, won't be caught up by this exception, but someone who's volunteering at a church or at a fete or something won't be. National minimum wage won't apply to that person. There are also some studying courses with years in industry where a year in a company is part of their degree, and there are some exceptions relating to that, but many universities insist on national minimum wage being paid or strongly advise national minimum wage being paid irrespective of what the law says. Incidentally, most universities won't allow any business to advertise an unpaid opportunity via their portals. So there is a massive shift away from that. Under 16s as well, who come in for a day or two, generally don't apply. But to be honest, if the person is doing work, the normal kind of work that a for-profit business requires, they'll usually be caught by national minimum wage. So given that, I guess we have to think about what the business case is for employers, because everybody needs training from your most senior staff to your most junior. So I think the starting point has to be one of mutuality. So it has to make sense that businesses are, receiving, a decent amount of value from investing in this type of talent. But I know from experiences that we have had personally in our business and in many of our clients that this tends to work out really nicely. So we know that about 3 billion is spent on hiring entry-level talent, training them, and the like in the UK. The ROI, there was a study done, I think it was University of Liverpool did a joint study that looked extensively at the ROI that you can receive from hiring a graduate, and they worked it out as 5 to 1 over a 2-year period. So there's definitely a lot to be gained, the labour costs, there are labour costs, but they're at a massive reduction to the average graduate wage. The hiring cost is often considerably less. You're addressing skills gaps within your organisation, and you're getting people into your organisation before they've potentially picked up bad habits from other companies, so you can kind of make them in your own mould. Then it also provides flexibility of headcount. So sometimes you might not be able to justify a full-time headcount for a whole year, but you might have enough work for 6 months or 3 months, and it's a really great way to provide opportunity and also cover cyclical workflows. And it's really early talent scouting. This is the secret between or behind many of the most successful businesses. They get their talent in really early. McKinsey invests incredibly highly in their talent, even at this early stage. They spend it is believed 10,000 per hire at the entry level to get the very best people, and they believe it's one of the secrets to their growth. And also you get to feel good. There's a lot about social mobility, opening up access, de-risking your hiring process to make sure that the people are right. And youth unemployment is one of the big issues at the state and at the individual level. So feeling that you're contributing to the solution is always a good thing. So there are plenty of places where we can point you for additional information, but on to questions. Anybody? Okay, great.
It would be really interesting, Sarita Brown from City.
Yeah.
We're obviously a global organisation, but American-based.
Mm.
And in the banking, we've got huge regulation around non-employment of relatives, and this category falls very well into that. So in the last kind of 2 to 3 years, we've spent a huge amount of time educating our business, especially our lovely traders and bankers, about that they can't just bring in nephew, niece, cousin. Are you seeing are there any challenges in terms of the work you do around that, or people referring people and just making sure that, the way we manage it is they have to just go through a meritocracy of a process and make sure that they're treated in the same way. But what's your kind of view on that?
So I think one of the more contentious areas of this topic is nepotism. So people who and there are multiple layers to that problem. One, it's maybe people who aren't necessarily a decent fit and just want to mark something off on their CV. So they may not even be passionate about stuff. So they demoralize your team because you're like, oh, who is this guy? Oh, it's someone's cousin. So you can't treat them like a normal, employee or team member, and maybe they're not that motivated. So many businesses offer a process that everyone has to go through that kind of reduces the risk of that. And when there is a clear process, and as you begin to formalize some of these things, I think a lot of that falls away. So when people come to us, it's about getting access to a broader range of people without having to necessarily, not all businesses have the time to go to all these universities and do the whole process. So we allow them to do that online very, very quickly, so that they can see a broad range of people with the skill sets that they're looking for. But the key take home, I think, for many businesses is they need to treat this type of hire like they would any type of hire, because it is just a normal hire. People have been trying for ages to create exceptions, it's the sons and daughters of the board members or what have you, but it's actually just a normal hiring process, which has real benefits if you do it right, but also can cause some real problems if you don't. So the beauty of the legal systems and the frameworks around this is it just gives a perfect kind of shield for any "this isn't fair, what's the matter" sort of thing. Be like, oh well, we have to run the process because we can be accused of bias. We can be if there isn't very much diversity in that group. There has been a lot of talk about some of the dark side of the internship industry. That's nepotism is one big one. Another one is auctions where people pay for internships. That's another one. It's a terrible idea. Never do it. Another one that we hear thankfully less about there is a rash of companies who are telling businesses that they'll place unpaid labour in their companies. They get paid, and then they take money from the students as well. So people are actually paying to work. We actually see that, which is probably the worst end of it, where often international students get caught with that, where they come over and they're paying sometimes over the equivalent of national minimum wage to work in a company, which is... I'm always flabbergasted when I hear about stuff like that, but it does happen, unfortunately. Any other questions? Right, yeah.
Hi, I was wondering, through Intern Avenue, what are the factors that you match individuals with organisations? I can see location, degree, but yeah.
So we've taken the view that typically when businesses come, they're looking to fill a space in a particular business function. So we're looking on the basis of business function, because when we talk to our employer, our clients, they'll say we need someone to help us with our marketing, or we need someone in sales, or we need someone who's creative to do some graphic design or what have you. So what we have done is we take the profiles and we think of all the connotations of what might make someone suitable for a marketing department, for example, or might be interesting to someone who's looking for someone in their finance department. So how do we do that? It's complex. We think about all of the myriad of degrees and all of the myriad of different types of work experience which might be relevant, and then we create a scoring and we're constantly updating it. We also see and we suggest candidates to the employers who hire via our system, and we train our system on the basis of what all of our employers are doing as to who might be a good fit. So as more and more employers use our platform, we get more and more of an understanding of who might be a great fit. But part of what you can do is you have access to everyone, and you can say, it's really, really important that they're experts in Hootsuite, or it's really important that they know something about some CAD software or something, and you can add that in there, and then you can see people who have specifically added that to their profile.
So you wouldn't include any ability or personality tests, that would be up to the individual organisations?
So it depends. So at the moment, we don't have it integrated, although we are testing psychometrics on the basis of the profiles in the background at the moment. We don't release that to people yet, but it's something that we have in the pipeline. When we work with employers, one of the key challenges that we have is to create something that's universal enough to be applicable to multiple people, but can be tailored. So with some of the clients that we work very closely with, we are an interface for their hiring process. So they might do some of the attraction on our platform, and then they might say to us, once we've selected these people, we want them to go through this particular process, and we can help them either design it or help funnel people through that process, because we have had people who have really, really detailed, I think the most detailed we've ever seen is a 9-step assessment process, which, we thought, I was like, okay, every person's business is different. All we can do is be as helpful as we can be. And if they feel that they need a 9-step process, I feel like that, we did say, that is unusual, but if you want a 9-step process, we can try and help. The thing that we find, and we, as part of the stuff that we're doing right now, testing some of these things like psychometrics and all the rest of it, we spoke to some real experts in the space of occupational psychology, and often what people want to do is just get into the same virtual room as people with the right skill sets, and then a lot of it is around chemistry. So I think in-person interview or telephone and then in-person interview often is one of the key components, because you pick up so much more information than you can just on understanding someone's Myers-Briggs profile and all the rest of it. So what we find is that's key, but we are looking at some of the more exciting things in the market, and we are currently testing a psychometrics model that might be able to help employers, but I think it'll be at least 6 to 9 months before we get any data to see whether people who have that information versus people who don't make better decisions. No problem. Hi.
So where are the students coming from, just to understand? Are they coming from, are you going to universities and then onboarding them? What's facilitation from that?
We've been really fortunate. We do go to universities, so we do campus tours. We work closely with the NUS, National Union of Students, but we also get fantastic word of mouth. And we've been really fortunate with the coverage that we've gotten. So we've been featured a lot in the press. I've just filmed some other things, television stuff around hiring. So I think people find us through either having spoken to people who have been hired via us or things like that. But we do believe in going to university campuses. But the vast majority, or the majority of people who are actually on our platform, I'd say just under 60% are actually graduates who have anywhere between a year to 2 years worth of work experience. So they might have done a placement somewhere or a couple of internships and be looking for their next opportunity. So there are definitely opportunities for students, but what we find is a lot of businesses really like the ability when someone comes into their business to subject to them getting through their 6 months or 3 months placement, they want them to continue then and there. So some people have summer internships and then have them join the team the next year, but a lot of businesses like the ability to trial someone out, see they're a fit, and then have them join the team straight away. Yeah, hi.
Alban Petition from Metropolitan.
Hi.
Hi, thanks very much. Just wondering, what has been the topic that your candidates have most found challenging?
Yeah, I'd say the thing that candidates find the most challenging is the repetition of the application process. So the number one bugbear that they have is having to go through multiple hoops, not knowing necessarily who might be of interest to them, and having to go through very, very long processes with multiple different employers before they might get a role. So one of the things that they like about our platform is we have the ability for employers very quickly to headhunt them, so find them using our system and invite them to interview, but also their profile it doubles as their application. So once they've created their profile, they can apply to multiple employers who are on the platform whilst they're looking in a couple of clicks once they've confirmed a couple of things. And it means that they don't have to go onto each of those people's individual application processes and, rinse, repeat. So that's one big thing that candidates dislike, and also lack of feedback. So they don't mind being told no, but being told nothing, they find incredibly distressing. So they complain quite bitterly about that, saying, well, I don't know whether, I might hear tomorrow or whether I'm just not in the running at all. So one thing that we try and advise employers to do is to just let people know. If someone is not a fit, just say, thank you so much, no. Or if the volumes that you get are really that high, I think we have some advice that we can give for that. But if the volumes are really that high, as part of the process, what you might want to do is just at least warn them that if you haven't heard within X amount of time, then the answer is no. So at least they know. I'd say those are the two top ones.
Is there a minimum criteria that you have for a candidate to be registered with Intern Avenue? So, i.e., do they have to have a university degree? Do they have to have accreditation to their name?
So we don't turn anyone away. And there are some things that we insist upon. They have to be over the age of 18, so we don't deal with anyone underneath that. They also have to have the right to work in the UK. I would say 90% have, more than 90% probably. I'll get you the exact number, but almost everyone has a degree or are studying for a degree who are on our platform today. Or they have some kind of qualification. So we are collecting additional qualifications all the time and trying to understand the weighting that should be applied as in comparison to various things. So we do have international students who come from different systems who sign up on our platform and might be doing a master's in the UK. So understanding how those grading systems work so that we can put them into our system is one of our challenges. Also, we have people who have done some kind of diploma which isn't, or further education that isn't technically a degree. We do have some of those, but really the majority of people that we're seeing right now do have a degree, and employers are traditionally looking for people with degrees who are or are studying for degrees who use us. I think there are some exceptions where developers are concerned because many, many of the best coders have been coding since they're 10 years old, and it's all about their portfolio and things like that. But that's just what we're seeing today. But we want to be more open. But in terms of demand on the employer side, it's typically university students or above.
So contrary to that as well, so you have a criteria that a candidate mustn't exceed for them to be eligible to register. So what would be stopping maybe an employer that wants to save a little bit of cash and get someone who's probably overqualified and pay them national minimum wage just because they've been affiliated with the Intern Avenue? Would you turn people away based on the fact they've got too much experience? Or?
We definitely wouldn't turn people away. And a perfect example is we hired a PhD biochemist via our platform, and we've also seen qualified lawyers on our platform, and they're unusual, so I call them actually myself, and I'm like, hi, did you mean to sign up as a intern? And often they want to change. So in the case of the PhD biochemist, she was almost, I couldn't believe it, but she had almost finished her dissertation. And she decided actually she wanted to go into marketing, and that's what she wants to do. And she's quitting her PhD, and she wants to do a complete 180 on her career. And she was just fantastic. To be clear, the minimum that we'll allow people to post is a national minimum wage. Many employers post much more than that. In our business, we start at 18k for our interns, but it's up to everyone, but we will not allow anyone to go below national minimum wage. And she ran our social media and marketing. She taught herself. She was absolutely wonderful. She was with us for a year, and then she moved up to Manchester and got a position as a marketing manager and is flying. And I think she's about to start her own business now. So I mean, this is the opportunity that you get. I mean, and we have MBAs. I mean, I had last year over the summer we had an MBA from Cambridge who joined the business. He had worked at Google for 2 years before his MBA. So, and he was running all kind of PPC campaigns and other things like that. So there are just amazing people with amazing backgrounds who are available and want to work for startups or want to try a different thing. And more power to them. The overqualified ones are the best ones, and the employers are delighted. I mean, we play someone who now does events at 10 Downing Street, and is running this charity that helps young people go to Silicon Valley and meet entrepreneurs. She speaks 4 languages, had 2 master's degrees, and is basically running this charity now. We placed her 2 years ago. So, I mean, overqualified is great, but they don't feel like that. They want the opportunity. So it's a real, stories like that really warm my heart. And I don't think they're exploitative. I think when we've got a video of her, Iria, she was saying that even with all of her qualifications, many people were trying to get her to work unpaid for most of the opportunities that she was being offered, despite having all of that were unpaid. So as a minimum, people are so grateful. It's fantastic. Yeah.
First of all, I'll get to be in the 88%.
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
How many other people will. So just think, as a small business ourselves, I've always looked at interns as potentially being quite a quick and easy way of accessing people. Linked to the points about qualifications, particularly eligibility to work.
Sure.
Do you offer any verification service
to
potential clients of yours? I presume the revenue models from the businesses signing up.
Yeah.
So if I'm a small business, I don't have a large HR department to deal with that for me. Can I make sure that I'm getting hold of someone who can work here is who they say they are?
Yeah, so we can definitely do that for you. Typically what we find ourselves, we can go as deep down the funnel as you need us to go, but many people use us at the top for selection and attraction. So usually what you would do is you would, get some candidates, decide who you wanted to go through some kind of assessment process, and then offer somebody a job subject to checking their references, qualifications, all that kind of good stuff. Usually people want to do that themselves and they have their own process, but we can definitely do that for you. And depending on what you want to check on the depth of the checks, we can offer a very lightweight fee. I think it's somewhere between £50 and £100, although we actually don't get asked to do it very often, to be honest, just because people have their own processes, but it's very easy for us to do that. Typically what we find is that with this type of pool of candidate, they're proving themselves. I mean, they don't, we have very strict rules in terms of spot checking. So we do that on the platform, but everyone in this room knows that the market has this issue. There are people who tell porcupines on their CVs, and it's sad. Usually at this end of the spectrum, it might be turning a 2-2 into a 2-1, but the proof of whether someone has the right attitude and the aptitude often can be seen in the assessment process if you've designed it right. From my perspective, I'm looking for potential and enthusiasm. I think if someone has those things, also for us, a love of learning is important. So because we give people a lot of access to a lot of stuff. We're a small business, so we give people a lot of access to things and a lot of responsibility, so they're trusted from day one. So if they don't know something, I'm really looking for the kind of people who'll say, I'm not entirely sure I know this, but I think I could probably find out how to do it in these areas, or can you point me in the direction? People who want to learn stuff, and really what we're looking for is attitude, and I think that's what most small businesses are looking for, and actually all businesses are looking for at this stage, the attitude and the passion, and then everything else should fall into place as long as they don't have any big things. But yeah, we can verify if that's a big issue, and more people should do it. I know quite a few of our smaller clients are like, well, we can't be bothered. Like, they'll either be good or they won't. I think it is a good idea to do it. We certainly do it in our business. We take, all your standard stuff, copies of passports and all the rest of it, and we do a background check for the last 3 years, and ask for references and do a check. So, yeah. Yeah.
I'm really interested, do interns actually seek advice from you around coaching and support to getting ready for interviews, and do you offer that service?
So we don't get enough requests for that, to be honest. I think part of what we're doing at the moment, we're doing college tours, and one of the things that we're trying to do is educate people, and we are thinking about actually designing like a boot camp that they can take online. When you get an interview offer, these are the things that you really have to make yourself aware of. It's sad that some people really shoot themselves in the foot still. There's so much information about how to make a good impression. I mean, it seems strange that we would even require it, but you'd be surprised how many people you ask, well, what do you know about my company? And, it's like blank faces. It's like, interview 101. Know something about the company before you go there. But, I think it's and to be fair, it's not just interns who have this problem. You'd be surprised. Very senior people can turn up to stuff and you're like, what? We are trying to add more guidance. We have a very detailed blog, and we have newsletters that we send out to everybody, which has lots of things about kind of how to get dressed for interview, what the checklists are. We are actually thinking about developing a video series that we'll send to everybody, but you can bring a horse to water, but that's about all that you can do. And often the kind of people who make those sorts of bloopers, it's indicative of other things, to be honest. So they're their own worst enemies. We're trying to educate people better, but the kind of person who isn't so motivated to kind of be looking for that kind of information, we have it on our site. kind of isn't the kind of person you probably would want in your organisation, sadly, and they're going to have to learn that the hard way a couple of times, and hopefully get a bit of a kick up the backside and get in gear. Yeah. Anyone else? No?
I'll ask you another one. Do you have a particular area of industry that you focus more on, let's say finance, or let's say IT, let's say? Is there a particular focus that you've got, or quite broad church?
We're fairly broad, but we do it by business function. So industries, we have a broad range. So one of our clients, for example, is the government, who, the Department of Work and Pensions is our client, but we have really small businesses which might have 2 or 3 people who are our clients. So some of our bigger industry sectors are tech, of course. We have many fast-growing tech companies who use us. Marketing agencies often use us for talent. We have finance clients, big and small. So we do a broad range, but really people are looking for business function. And in terms of business function, it's majority, we do have a couple of people who are looking for tech people, but mainly it's general business function. So sales and marketing, other types of business development, operations, research, those sorts of things, finance. We have people who look for people who are legally trained, but not necessarily law firms, which is quite interesting. Contract workers, for example, people to work in their contracts department. So most general business functions is what people use us for, and then a couple of specialists. We don't have that many clients who look for engineers on our platform, although we've had 1 or 2.
Dupsy, one question from me. The government announcing this new apprenticeship levy from April 2017, 0.5% payroll. It's going to fund a significant investment fund. As I understand it, apprentices are very broadly defined, could include MBAs. Any indication that interns could be part of that, so there could be additional funds available?
There's a bill going through government at the moment to clarify what the government means by an intern, or what's to kind of do that. And there's been a lot of push from student groups, including the NUS, for them to do that. I think students who have gone to university feel that they're in quite a difficult spot, given that their tuition fees are getting higher and higher, and not everybody is finding what is traditionally termed a graduate job after they leave. So there's a lot of concern that the government just kind of want to encompass apprenticeships in everything, including graduates potentially doing apprentices, which further muddies the water as to whether it's worth even doing, from a vocational perspective, doing a degree if you're going to leave and have to do an apprenticeship as well. And there's also a lot of pushback around the wages associated with apprenticeships, because they might be £3 an hour, which might be appropriate for someone who's spending half their time in school and half their time doing some on-the-job training, but probably isn't appropriate for a fully 21, 22-year-old fully trained graduate who is able to do everything, including managing stuff. So it's interesting to see how that will develop. There is a big push on formalising what internships mean, but Lord knows whether it'll go all the way through. Any other questions? Okay.
No? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dupsy. I'm sure we'll join you and give a round of applause. If anybody wants to talk to me about anything that's touching this, or anything, you can take my business card, or you can email support at Intern Avenue, or if you email DA, Dupsy Abiola, DA at Intern Avenue, you'll get me, and
I can answer anything. And if you have any other questions about anything that I've done, you can come up and have a chat to me. I'll be around for a little bit.
Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for lunch.
Oh yes, yes.
But before we break for lunch, just a couple of dates for your diary. Our next meeting, February, evening of the 9th of February, we have Liz Lang, who's sitting here, just over here in the check jacket, is going to be speaking with a barrister, Nadia Motragi, on a really fascinating topic. Is this the end of trade unionism as we know it? So I'm sure you're aware lots of legislation is pending to perhaps restrain the role of trade unions going forward. So very much looking forward to that, Liz, in terms of how that will pan out. And then hot off the press, I can announce our March meeting is now confirmed. Evening of 17th of March, we have John Philpott speaking. John is the chief economist for the CIPD. John will be giving an economic overview on short and long-term economic trends in the UK from an employment perspective, so I think that will be a fascinating presentation as well. So hopefully you can make both of those events. Those of you here as guests today, I hope you've enjoyed it. Welcome your feedback. If you are interested in joining, do speak to myself or Denise or Fraser or Kay, and we can give you more details about joining. So thank you and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.